At issue tonight, another Conservative crosses the floor. After announcing his resignation last year, Alberta MP Matt Jeneroux has decided to stay on, but for the Liberals.
For me, it felt disingenuine and quite simply wrong to be sitting on the sidelines anymore. So I reached out to the Prime Minister's office and will be joining his caucus, and I couldn't be more proud.
3 MPs have now left Pierre Poilievre's team, and while he survived his leadership review with 87%, there are questions about how he manages his caucus. So what does the latest floor crossing mean for the Conservative Party? What does it mean for Pierre Poilievre's leadership going forward? I feel like we've asked this question before. I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne, Althia Raj, good to see you all. We'll start with the floor crossing, but I also want to throw Jamil Jivani into the mix as part of sort of the questions around how Mr. Poilievre is managing his caucus. But Chantal, I'll just start with you. It seemed as though Matt Jeneroux, for lack of a better word, had been sort of contained, that he was just going to resign and go off. And apparently the Liberals kept working on things and they've managed to claim him. What do you make of 3 MPs in about 3 months crossing the floor?
Well, the first thing I make is that the 2 of them are long-standing Conservatives. I think Matt Jeneroux was elected as a Conservative since 2015 and previously as a Conservative to the Edmonton Legislative Assembly. So these are not, at least 2 of them, new Conservative converts who have suddenly discovered that they failed to take the right path. I think the message, you asked about caucus management. I would say some of what is happening now are chickens coming home to roost, i.e. there was not a lot of empathic, constructive caucus management until the last election because Mr. Poilievre felt he didn't have to do anything about his MPs. He was going to win the election and they were going to be lucky to be in government. If you treat people badly when you're on the way up, you will tend to meet them on the way down. And he is on the way down. He doesn't want an election. Those members who are floor crossing do not want an election either, and they've at least bought him some insurance against that.
I mean, Andrew, I did feel, Althia and I were both in Calgary, I felt coming out of Calgary as though there was a page that had been turned, a sort of a reset. Well, silly me, I guess. Where do you think we are at then in terms of his leadership?
Well, it's not just the leader, it's the party and the leader are both under a lot of pressure. And the pressure is Donald Trump. Every time Donald Trump erupts and says something nasty, the Liberals go up in the polls, the Conservatives go down. They know, at least some of them know, they have to address that, they have to take a firmer stand. But they can't, they feel, because a significant section of their party is actually pretty okay with Donald Trump. And so you have this ridiculous situation where Jamil Jivani goes down to Washington and effectively takes the side of Donald Trump on a number of issues, portrays them as sympathetic and reasonable, portrays Canadians as being engaged in a hissy fit, et cetera. I'm all in favor of MPs being able to speak their mind. It's fine to criticize the government of the day, but when you go down and take the side of the government that is attempting at the very least to destroy the trade agreement, possibly to annex the country, you've crossed a few lines, and it's very damaging to the party's brand. They know it, at least again, the sensible ones do. But what actual consequences followed for Jamil Jivani? Very little, slap on the wrist at most. So you've got that, you've got these floor crossings, and nobody seems to think they're at an end. You've got a very divided party, and Mr. Poilievre is, to some extent, the victim of that, and to some extent, the architect of it.
What do you make of that, Althia? Is there something that Pierre Poilievre could have done to prevent this or to better manage Jamil Jivani? Certainly, Conservatives I talked to were very perplexed at why Jamil Jivani was not being sort of managed better.
Raked across the coals. There's a lot of things happening.
Yes.
If you just, inside the caucus, you basically have a bunch of MPs who are restless, who have been sitting on the opposition benches for a really long time. And it was one thing to take kind of the heavy-handed approach of the leader when he was plus 25 points in the polls, but now he is dragging the party down with him. He is deeply unpopular. They feel that Pierre Poilievre is not talking about the issues that their constituents are talking about. Andrew talked about Donald Trump. That is key. Up until this week, Pierre Poilievre hadn't mentioned Donald Trump, really. So there's that. There is the way caucus is being managed. Jamil Javani gets to go down to D.C., as Andrew pointed out, and basically live stream his entire trip. And these MPs are, playing by the rules, asking the leader if they can go on Power and Politics, another TV program, and talk to the media, and they're being told no. No, absolutely not. And a little bit of that loosened after the election, but not really that much. And so they feel like they don't have a voice. They don't support the direction of the party. They don't understand what their leader is doing. He seems to be more focused on the Twitter influencers than he is on the constituents they hear about at the door. And in some cases, and we've seen with some of the floor crossers, they're more likely to win their seats as Liberals. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the mix that is convincing people that, why are they sticking with Pierre Poilievre when they have the possibility of influencing things in a government that they don't disagree with?
Yeah. I mean, Conservatives, the other thing that some of them are saying is that he just needs time. And if he can get the time, because there won't be an election, we all seem to agree because of the way things are going, then it will make a difference. Chantal.
Okay, I covered John Turner after the 84 election on the same basis. He just needs time. And the time that he got was 4 or 5 years of backstabbing by his own members. At some point, the notion has gone through the minds of many members in caucus that there are alternatives to Mr. Poilievre as leader and that they would be better served by him. That vote you went to, which was supposed to turn a page, a number of people said that vote is okay because we're going to lose the next election to Mark Carney and we will then move on to a winner. It wasn't Pierre Poilievre needs time and he's going to take us to victory. Also, keep in mind that Quebec and Atlantic Canada and half of Ontario was barely represented at that vote. Yeah. So the MPs from those regions are not really bound by whatever happened in Calgary. But when you put all of that together, what you have is a mix of MPs. Those that want to stay would like Mr. Poilievre to not be there in 3 years, and those that want to go have a good excuse. The last time you saw MPs do that with a good excuse was the unity crisis after the referendum. People have forgotten that Jean Chrétien raided Joe Clark's Tory caucus. And the reason the Quebec MPs who went to the Liberals from Quebec on that was federalist versus sovereigntist. Well, now it's the good fight is Mark Carney is fighting it, and we want to be on the side of the good fight. I'm not saying that's totally the reason, but it does give cover to floor crossers.
Yeah. It does, but it seems that then that's an impossible situation for Pierre Poilievre, Andrew.
Yeah, I might dare to suggest that the polls might have something to do with it. Something happened in the last few weeks. First of all, Poilievre himself got no lift coming out of the convention, so he may have sold well in the hall, but not to the country at large. Secondly, what had previously been a leadership gap but not a party gap, that is to say, Poilievre trails Mark Carney in the leadership numbers by over 20 points, but until recently was only about 2 or 3 points behind the parties were. In the last couple of weeks, it's moved to about an 8 or 9 point gap. So it's starting to translate, that leadership gap is starting to translate into party gap. And at that point, people look at that and go, well, he can't win for us. And that's probably his worst sin in the eyes of many MPs.
Last minute to you, Althia.
Do you want to go back on this idea that there is not going to be an election? Because the Conservatives, many of them are convinced that there will be. And in fact, that they kind of think that their leader is baiting one by suggesting that what Mr. Carney is doing by trying to gobble together a majority government through so-called backroom deals, that's why Pierre Poilievre called them on social media this week, gives the Prime Minister a legitimacy, an actual legitimacy, not suggesting the opposition is obstructionist, because really they haven't really been, but to say, well, he needs a mandate. And so they are convinced that is still on the table. Liberal MPs, though, say that is absolutely not on the table, and the Prime Minister wants to be assured of a victory and is not assured of a victory at the numbers that he would like them, and so he will not call one. But I don't think that's completely off the table yet.
Okay. At issue, NDP leadership. 5 candidates are competing to lead the New Democrats and bring them back to party status. The candidates have different backgrounds: a parliamentarian, a farmer, a social worker, a union leader, and an activist, with MP Heather McPherson and Avi Lewis seen as frontrunners. So what comes next for the New Democratic Party? And has this race helped the party appeal to more Canadians? Let's bring everyone back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. Should say we are recording this before their second and final debate that's happening tonight, but wanted to sort of get a sense of where you all think things are at and what it tells you about where the party is headed at this stage. Althia.
I feel harsh saying this, but nowhere. Like, what has happened this week is that we've heard that Alexandre Boulris, the sole Montreal NDP MP, is thinking of jumping ship to Québec Solidaire. He told me he wouldn't comment on rumors, but he didn't deny it. And, you know, he fronted the NDP French language debate, which was mostly a bilingual English debate last fall. And that debate was I'm sorry to say, also, I feel bad, a disaster. Like, they don't speak French. Avi Lewis had the best French, and it's not that great. And you obviously see, like, how are they going to appeal to the 8 million Canadians living in that province? And, you know, this could have been a moment where there's a candidate that suggests that in light of the way that Prime Minister Carney is governing, there is room and a need for progressive alternative on the left. And, you know, we should be joining forces with the Greens and uniting disenchanted liberals under the fold into a practical force. Nobody is saying that. And so you have like a more radical ideological agenda with Avi Lewis, who's a terrific communicator. Heather McPherson doesn't seem to have been able to lift off her campaign, and she's the one who's kind of the more pragmatic candidate, if you wish. Like, I feel bad for them, but it has not gone well.
Yeah, you don't have to feel bad for anybody. That's what this panel is about. It is surprising to me that they haven't found the room that Althia is talking about, that they are talking, you know, why are they not talking more about climate change? Why are they talking about AI so much? It seems like there's space there. Chantal, what do you make of what you're seeing and hearing?
But they may be talking about all that, but they don't have an audience at this point. Why? In part, it's not just on them. In part, because people at this point, voters, are still focused on picking the right prime minister to deal with Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah.
And the NDP was not in the race last year and is not in the race with those 3 candidates. Yes, bad times, worse times are coming for the NDP. We talked about polls earlier. They show the NDP dead in the water. In Quebec, Alexandre Boulris is the last standing member of the so-called Orange Wave, but the only reason he gets elected is because of his name and not because of the NDP. The NDP is back 20 years in Quebec as a foreign object. And that debate that Althia described, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
I have watched progressive conservative debates in the bad times for that party with candidates who were not great at French. I have never watched a disaster like the French, so-called French language debate of the NDP. But at the same time, look who Mark Carney has recruited as a candidate to run in Bill Blair's former riding in Scarborough. The deputy leader of the Ontario NDP legislature. And at the same time, you've got NDP leaders in Alberta, Naheed Nenshi, or in British Columbia, basically saying, do not come and mess things up for us.
Yeah,
my concern, if I were the NDP, an NDP member, I would be worried that the 2 main candidates, Avi Lewis and Heather McPherson, will struggle to unify the other side of that battle, because they are on different planets, and I'm not sure either of them is on a winning planet.
And you know, you didn't mention there, of course, Wab Kinew, an NDP premier who is, you know, successful and lots of people are looking at as sort of the future of something. Anyway, Andrew, your thoughts.
Well, I hate to be the odd man out, but I think
Please do.
I think my colleagues are far too optimistic. The problem, another problem that they're facing is, for the first time in their history, they're now on the back foot on both fronts, on both the left and their right flanks. So the Liberals have been eating into their support amongst soft left progressives. The Conservatives are eating into their support amongst blue-collar workers, unionized workers.
Yeah.
The NDP is always an uneasy coalition between those two because they have disagreements about things like whether we should be building stuff. I fear that this leadership race may exacerbate that. I mean, Heather McPherson probably has the best chance of holding on to those soft left voters. Rob Ashton, the union candidate, probably has the best chance of holding on to the blue-collar vote. Avi Lewis, you can well imagine repelling both of them. Too extreme for the soft left, too hostile to industry for the unionized workers. And if that's the case, he may excite a small hardcore of downtown progressives on the far left of the spectrum, but at the cost of any chance of the party breaking out of the trap that it's now in.
But it also, doesn't it indicate too that the best they could hope for right now is official party status? Like the dreams of Jack Layton forming government are long gone. Chantal?
That sounds like a hard goal to attain, to tell you the truth. If they're going to lose, for instance, their lone Quebec member, Mr. Poilievre, they're not going to keep that seat. They're not even going to be in contention to keep that seat. And the story is the same for many of the current members of the party, those who are in the House of Commons. So this isn't a party that is growing. It's actually moving backwards. I saw some seat projections based on polls that showed, 2 NDP seats left. And that's all based on personality, not on party branding.
Yeah, and says and does not even go near the idea that the Liberals are still trying to attract NDP MPs to cross the floor as well, which we've heard about and has been denied. Okay, yes, Althia, quickly.
There's one that might still cross, but the others might just sit as independents depending on who wins the leadership. Like that's the other part that we haven't really spoken about, because some of them do not see themselves sitting, for example, in Avi Lewis's tent. And so he is like the best case scenario for both the Conservatives and the Liberals, and they'll talk openly about it, but he has the most momentum with the members whose support he has courted. He's raised the most money. He seems to be way ahead of everybody else.
At issue, North American free trade. As Canada's new ambassador starts his job in Washington, the minister responsible spent the week in Mexico looking for new opportunities. As the CUSMA review approaches, Dominic LeBlanc says Canada has been preparing.
We have been doing the work necessary in Canada to prepare for this not surprising review that was built into the agreement 6 years ago. And so have the Mexicans and so have the Americans.
Here to break down what the latest is when it comes to the future of CUSMA and our negotiations with the U.S., Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. Yes, we talk about it every week. These guys made that point to me already. But there are a couple of little threads I think we can pull on. Dominic LeBlanc leading that, what they say is one of the biggest trade missions ever to Mexico. A new ambassador in Washington taking up post. The naming of the former clerk and high commissioner to the U.K. as the chief negotiator. There are some things being put in place here. So I don't know, Andrew, if you want to read tea leaves about what this tells you about how the government views the state of these talks.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see whether the talks take place. To judge by some of the commentary, or not commentary, but the off-the-record quotes from both sides, the president's thinking about busting up the whole trilateral deal and just trying to negotiate 2 bilateral deals. The Canadian side saying, well, we're not sure we're going to even just going to walk away perhaps from the table. Obviously, a lot of that can be written off as pre-bargaining positioning, but when you're dealing with somebody as volatile as Trump, I'm not sure you can necessarily write these things off. He would face a firestorm in his own backyard if he were to break up the deal. But he's done similar things before that were just as irritating to his base. He doesn't seem to care that much. So it's too soon to tell, but there's real potential for this thing to break down. And again, as we've said many times on the show, the Canadian side has to be prepared to walk away because we've no idea what kind of demands are going to be made at this table far beyond trade, usual items of trade, and we have no basis for being able to assume that any undertakings that were made by the Trump side would be kept.
Right. I mean, not to get too inside baseball, but I do think the change in who's doing these talks is sort of interesting because the ambassador is someone who's trusted by the prime minister, is a business guy. The negotiator, Jenna Charette, knows government and knows how to, get things moving on that front. So I don't know whether that makes a difference with a Donald Trump, but it does seem to me like pieces are being put in place to best position us moving forward. I don't know if anyone agrees with that, Chantal.
Well, at the very least, it does show that we're taking this seriously. That
Right.
We're not just sitting back and saying, well, we're not going to be serious about this because there's no end game here. And that is what Canada should be doing. Mark Wiseman probably has a good relationship with the Prime Minister. After all, he appointed him. But he has no government experience, really, federal government experience, and no diplomatic experience. So the notion that you would go to Janice Charette, who's got all of that, former clerk under two prime ministers, interestingly, she rose to fame as the clerk, the top civil servant under Stephen Harper, in the same way that Mark Carney became bank governor under Stephen Harper and was reappointed later by Justin Trudeau. So that's fairly rare, but also served in the UK. So she's got all the credentials, and I think possibly as importantly, she was part of the inner circle that was around Mark Carney during his leadership campaign. So she's not just a name. She has a professional relationship with the current prime minister. And I think that's probably smart because if this is all going to go south, as in fail, you need to demonstrate that you put your strongest team forward and gave it a real try.
Althia, last word to you on this.
I agree with everything Chantal has said. It's probably not a bad thing to reset the relationship, but I think one can easily view Janice Charrette's appointment as, I don't want to say babysitter, but basically she's come in to guide the new ambassador who doesn't know where the bodies are buried and doesn't know how to affect change and how to get the Ottawa machine working. And so yes, she was on the transition team. Yes, she was part of the Liberal leader's campaign. She knows him very well. But I think it's also about making sure that ambassador is given the tools and the framework in which to succeed. And so I think you can see it through that angle.
Okay, I fear we'll be talking about this almost every week until something is sorted out, but you'll live with me. Thank you all. That is that issue for this week. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thank you for watching.